In January 2020, Microsoft announced a challenge comparable to humanity's next moonshot, becoming carbon negative by 2030, when Microsoft will remove more carbon from the environment than it emits. Microsoft has also pledged to eliminate all carbon emissions from the environment by 2050, including direct emissions or carbon emissions from electricity use, since the company was founded in 1975. In July 2020, Apple announced that its entire business activities, manufacturing, supply chain, and midlife products will be carbon neutral by 2030, which also shows that it is better than the IPCC, the organization established by the United Nations in 1988 to study and evaluate changes, set at 2050. A more aggressive goal for 2019 to eventually reach zero climate shocks. At the same time, Microsoft linked Nike, Starbucks, Unilever, Mercedes-Benz, Danone and other industry leaders to establish the Transform to Net Zero Alliance, which is committed to promoting the transformation of various industries to net zero emissions. It can be seen that whether it is net zero, carbon negative, carbon neutral or climate neutral, they are all goals of climate action, all of which are to slow down, adapt and even reverse the challenges of survival of human civilization under the climate crisis. According to the research of scientists, the major reason for the current climate crisis is that the human industrial revolution produces a large amount of greenhouse gases, which has caused global warming to rise. It will be uninhabitable by humans in 2100. To prevent the Earth from continuing to heat up, one of the keys is to reduce global carbon emissions back to 2005 levels before 2050. The global carbon neutrality issue has created a market for carbon rights trading. Countries have successively opened carbon rights exchanges to issue carbon rights products. The UFD platform also participates in the research of global carbon rights products, using carbon rights ETFs, carbon rights contract exchanges and green energy spot contracts, and other combined commodities to engage in carbon rights trading. The carbon rights contract adopts a single annualized rate of return. Members can buy and sell arbitrarily during the listing period of the contract and get the weekly interest every Sunday, and the interest income is directly returned to the member's wallet, which can be used freely and flexibly for funds and for conservative investors. It is a stable and safe investment commodity. What is net zero, carbon negative, carbon neutral, climate neutral? Net zero, carbon negative, etc. are all action targets for the climate crisis. For most companies or organizations, the meanings of these terms may be very close. Further analysis of the different definitions of these terms will reveal the impact on companies or organizations. Different requirements and missions. According to the IPCC definition, what is carbon neutral? Is a business or an organization's CO2 emissions that are carbon neutral, or net zero CO2, when they are balanced by CO2 removal, usually a measurement period of 1 year. Net zero carbon, net zero. What is net zero? It is because the greenhouse gases that cause balloon warming are not only carbon dioxide, but also methane, etc. To reverse the climate crisis, it is not enough to reduce carbon, but to reduce all greenhouse gas emissions. Net zero means that greenhouse gas emissions are close to zero. Value. The IPCC pointed out that without the natural greenhouse effect, the average temperature of the Earth's surface would drop below freezing and humans would not be able to live. However, human activities such as burning fossil fuels and indiscriminate deforestation have greatly expanded the natural greenhouse effect, which in turn will cause global warming. Scientists have analyzed that more than 99% of the Earth's atmosphere is composed of N2 and O2, and the gases with the highest content are nitrogen, 78% in the dry atmosphere, and O2, 21%, which have little greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect mainly comes from water vapor, followed by CO2, and the presence of a small amount of CH4, O3, and 2O, CFCs, HCFCs, HFCs, etc. in the atmosphere can also cause the greenhouse effect. IPCC believes that in the past century, the burning of a large amount of coal and oil in automobiles, airplanes, power plants and factories has emitted a large amount of CO2 and enhanced the greenhouse effect. In addition, the lifetime of greenhouse gases emitted into the air is as long as tens of thousands over the years and stable. The concentration of carbon dioxide has increased rapidly since the human industrial revolution and is the greatest threat. What is carbon negative? If a company or organization removes far more carbon dioxide than it emits, it will achieve a carbon negative effect. What is climate neutrality? In addition to striving for net zero emissions of various greenhouse gases, it also considers regional or local geophysical effects, such as the radiative forcing effect from aircraft condensation traces. Enterprises or organizations strive to develop towards zero environmental impact. There is an opportunity to achieve climate neutrality. How can businesses or organizations achieve these climate action goals? Achieving these climate action goals starts with knowing how much greenhouse gas does your company or organization emit each year. Which operations or manufacturing processes generate a large amount of greenhouse gases, so you should conduct an inventory of the carbon footprint of your own company, including operating processes and manufacturing. In practice, the carbon footprint inventory is divided into Category 1, it is the direct greenhouse gas emissions of enterprises, organizations, such as the use of methane and other gases in the manufacturing process. Scope 2, indirect emission sources of energy, mainly through the use of electricity, heat or steam to cause indirect greenhouse gas emissions. Category 3, greenhouse gas emissions from organizational activities, such as greenhouse gases from the movement of employees. After the inventory, it is necessary to analyze the state of various greenhouse gas production, reduce what can be reduced, and replace what cannot be reduced. For example, in the electricity consumption of Category 2, saving electricity can reduce greenhouse gases, but it is impossible for human civilization to use electricity. Therefore, by changing the energy structure, such as using a large amount of renewable energy to replace coal or gas power generation, carbon dioxide can be reduced. Emission. Why do most countries or companies set 2030 or 2050 as a net zero action period? The United Nations set 17 SDGs in 2015, with the assumption at the time that most of the goals would be reached by 2030. For example, the eradication of poverty for SDGs 1 requires the elimination of extreme poverty by 2030, where people live on less than $1.25 a day, or by 2030, to ensure that everyone has access to affordable clean energy, and to implement forest ecological protection, etc. The 2015 United Nations Climate Summit, COP21, concluded the Paris Climate Agreement, with hundreds of countries agreeing to reach the goal of carbon neutrality by 2050. The most important thing about the Paris Climate Agreement is that countries that agree to it have pushed forward domestic legislation to enact the net zero goal to ensure that the common goal of mankind can be achieved. The United States once announced that it would withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement when former President Trump, which shocked the global carbon reduction process. But after Biden took office, he has returned to the agreement. Before Biden took office, Japan, South Korea, and mainland China also proposed a net zero schedule, and the EU accelerated carbon reduction through the Green New Deal. Therefore, fast-paced companies choose to achieve net zero or carbon neutrality by 2030, and to achieve these action goals by 2050 at the latest, will be the goals that all companies and organizations must accomplish in the future. The global carbon neutrality issue has created a market for carbon rights trading. Countries have successively opened carbon rights exchanges to issue carbon rights products. The UFD platform also participates in the research of global carbon rights products, using carbon rights ETFs, carbon rights contract exchanges and green energy spot contracts, and other combined commodities to engage in carbon rights trading. For example, the Carbon Neutrality Found Q4 commodity annualized return of 75% is a great investment option. Carbon rights contracts use a single annualized rate of return. Both DeFi compound and carbon exchange trading are a good choice. UFD has been exploring a very interesting phenomenon. CeFi Exchange is breaking the mold and innovating by expanding into decentralized finance and business. For example, Binance Smart Contract and Gate.io SHIPOSwap are actively developing DeFi projects for customers, but how to arbitrage on different platforms is the core technology of Ultra Finance Tech. Creating the most favorable investment portfolio for platform members is the expectation of the UFD platform. Next, it will create a new investment atmosphere in the cryptocurrency market so that investment can grow with